Hey, welcome to the show. We're all about talking with people who didn't let their ideas stay ideas. They took a risk and made them a reality despite feeling not quite ready, and that includes us. So we're asking for a favor. Please like, subscribe, share with your friends if you enjoy what we're doing and want to see us keep making more episodes. It all helps. Even better, leave a comment suggesting how we can improve. We want to keep making quality episodes that you enjoy listening to. So thanks for the support. Let's get into it.
Yes, we do have a fear of doing a full podcast episode and at the end being like, oh, we forgot to record. So
Surprise.
we've been close.
We almost did it once, actually.
Yes, we've been close.
Which would have been tragic. I think we would have had to make up some story.
I think we just shut down the podcast at that point and never talked.
You just blame it on technology. I feel like that's just always like the cloud. I don't know. Just the cloud lost it.
Yes. So I guess to sort of set the stage, we obviously found you online, and thank you so much for responding to our cold email. But so you're a fashion stylist, and a personal shopper. I guess quickly, how would you describe, for people who don't really know what that is, what is it that you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, and first of all, thank you for finding me. I don't know how that happened, but I appreciate that you found me somehow. And found my contact information. So a stylist and a personal shopper, I feel like it's a glorified shopping bag holder. I feel like, yeah, you know what? There's a lot. It sounds like a very glamorous job, and day to day, it is a lot of going to malls and doing pickups and drop offs. But I do want to lead with how beautiful of a job it is. And so essentially, I have the honor of helping people look and feel their best, choosing clothes that are really going to complement them, empower them, and make them look their best.
Nice, very cool. So with that stage set, we thought we would kind of go into a few rapid fire questions just to get things going and a little more fun. So you're obviously very into fashion, or at least I assume you are if you're shopping for people. So some quick questions. So what is your favorite brand?
Ooh. So I would say more a retailer, and it's Winners.
Winners. So
Winners. Yeah.
Wow. So why Winners? I was expecting Chanel or something.
I love Winners because, and this used to be their tagline, I'm not an ambassador by any means, but it's the thrill of the find.
Yeah.
And I love just like finding gems. And I feel like I'm really good at it. And I mean, who doesn't love finding a deal? So I also love that I could find these amazing pieces at really like awesome price points. And again, I'm not like getting paid by the brand. This is just a genuine love for Winners.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to know more on this one, because what are the Winners tips? Because sometimes I'll go into Winners and it's just like overwhelming. Are there like times of the season when they like sometimes you go in and they've got really good stuff for good price, and other times not so much? Is there like a trick for like when you time like restocks or anything like that?
Yeah, good question, Taylor. Honestly, it's being at as many as you can, as often as you can. So I feel like people are like, how do you do it? I'm like, I am at Winners and Marshalls, which is the same company, like just far too often. Like anytime I'm driving, if I see one on the side of the road, like I'm pulling over. So I'd say it's just actually being there as much as you can in order to find the gems. And I've heard like some theories like, oh, Thursday mornings is when they get their new product and go on a Thursday morning. But I think it varies by location. So I think they get new product every day. So yeah, it's just actually stocking every location.
So you got to put in the work. So what would you say your favorite designer brand is, though? Like a little more, like if you could wear anything, what would it be? What brand?
I really like YSL.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, did you say Chanel before?
That was yes. That was my guess when we went to
Yeah,
Winners,
I mean, who wouldn't
Yes.
want to wear Chanel?
Yeah. Okay, so what would be your least favorite, I guess, retailer or brand?
Ooh. I mean, I'm not perfect in terms of consumption with fast fashion, but I know that there are some that you see online and pieces cost just under $10 and will arrive at your home within hours. And I think, yeah, that definitely like raises a brow for me. So some of those 4 5 letter name places that are coming from the other side of the world, that makes me a little bit concerned.
Okay. Okay. So we're not throwing names. You're too nice to insult the
This
company.
is my political.
Yeah. That's okay. Okay. Well, we'll let the audience's imagination go with that one. But what would be the number one styling tip for women that you think is like low hanging fruit that is an easy way to up your style?
I would say it's all about fit. And I know that might sound obvious, but what I often see is either women are wearing clothes that are too tight or that are like far too loose. And I know right now there's, an emphasis on that oversized kind of fit and look, and it's very on trend. But sometimes for women, it's like, we know something's not quite fitting us anymore. It's a little bit tight. But some women get really, and men too, they get really tied up in the number or the letter on a piece of clothes. And if we could just let go of that and just really focus on the actual fit of the garment and how it fits our bodies, then I think that would like definitely help in terms of how people are presenting themselves. So yeah, I guess long story longer, let go of the letter or number and just really make sure that the piece is fitting our bodies as best as possible, because that's really gonna, help to make us look better.
Gotcha. And is the same tip for men?
Yeah, honestly, it is. I think that's like a universal tip, no matter what your gender.
Gotcha. Okay, so who would you say, what celebrity has the best style? Man or woman? Or both?
I am sure. I am obsessed with Tracy Ellis Ross.
I don't even know who that is.
That's okay. Um, so yeah, you can look her up after. She's an absolute queen. So she's Diana Ross's daughter,
Okay.
and she is an actress. She is a model. She is an activist. She's everything, and she just has like the most phenomenal style.
Okay. So that would be the girl. What guy do you think has the best style?
Mm. Damn, I'm like, okay, I guess I should have done a little prep
That's
research.
okay. We did have a previous stylist on as well. And
Stephen Scragg.
Yeah. What a surprise.
Yes.
Yes.
Hands down, Steven. Yes.
No, she said
Yeah.
Timothy Chalamet was her choice.
Interesting.
So that one's taken.
Yeah, okay, so I'm not going to choose Timothy.
Yeah.
Can we get back to it?
Yes.
Can I think on that?
We'll circle back at the very end. What would you say your favorite accessory is?
I love jewelry. I love earrings.
Earrings?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know for some, they kind of do it all. There's a necklace, there's earrings, and I mean I do as well. But I would say for the most part, I focus on a statement earring.
Okay, a statement earring. Okay, that's a good answer. When did ankle socks become dorky? Because I always wear ankle socks, and apparently I just missed it, and now they're cringe to wear ankles. So when did that happen?
I think this happened it started about 2 years ago.
Oh wow! So I just found out about this like a month ago. So okay.
That's okay, Steven.
Yeah. Someone called me a boomer for wearing ankle socks. I'm like, wait, what? When did this? I thought it was the opposite.
But listen, you ask, it's so subjective. And I think that's the beauty of fashion, and fashion is a branch of art, is that what one person finds cringe, another person finds, inspirational. It's like, choose your own adventure.
Yeah. I mean, it does hurt when like a Gen Z's like that's boomer or cringe. Like, what? But yeah, I don't know. Tube socks feel like a straitjacket. They're just all up your leg. I don't know. It just, I'm going to have to learn though.
They're not for everyone, but
Yes,
I would say like, you don't know till you try.
Yes.
And it's also, it's got to be the right sock too. If it's too long, it's going to look like, you're a schoolboy in a uniform.
Yes.
It really takes the right, again, I'm coming back to the fit. It takes the right fit.
Okay, that is helpful. Okay, so that's the rapid fire section. I guess we'll come back on the male celebrity with best style, but
Thank you. Thank you.
now, so yeah, as Taylor sort of said, we like to sort of get a sense of your background and understanding like your journey to where you ended up now. So I guess the first question would be, where did you grow up, and if you had any entrepreneurs or creators or fashion stylists or anything in your family that kind of inspired you?
Hmm. Yeah, so I grew up in Mississauga, suburb of Toronto.
Okay.
Shout out 905. And yeah, that's a great question in terms of entrepreneurs. To be honest, it wasn't, that really wasn't a line in the family in terms of entrepreneurs, but my dad did come from Italy on his own to Canada.
Okay.
So in that sense, I mean, that's a pretty huge step in terms of being courageous and blazing his own trail. So, and I mean, my mom also came from Italy to Canada, but she did come with her family, whereas my dad came on his own. So I would say if, looking at my parents, I would say it's more so from my dad that I kind of acquired this like drum to my own beat.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting. That's actually a trend we've sort of noticed as well when we've talking to people on the podcast or kind of creators. It seems like a lot of them, not so much maybe entrepreneurs in the family, but they usually had like a parent who sort of took a risk and maybe
Mm.
immigrated to a new country or something like that. So, no, that's really interesting. And then we saw on your website that you said you had two older sisters and you were always into fashion. And was that something that like as long as you can remember, you've just always had like an eye for it and something you were always interested in? Did you work on it or were you just drawn to it? Just sort of curious, like if this was sort of like a calling that you felt like you always wanted to do or something that you like proactively tried to pursue?
Yeah, great question. So I've always been drawn to fashion. I think having the two older sisters and my mom was and is very fashionable. So I think having her as an example, and I loved playing with her clothes and her high heels when I was little. So that was the starting point, and that's where I really developed this love for style and fashion, and was so excited to think about the day when I'd be able to wear heels and dress up and look fancy. So it definitely started at home, but then I would say like it wasn't really like I as a child I wasn't like, oh, I can't wait to work in fashion. That
Yeah.
wasn't a thing, because honestly, Stephen, like I didn't even know that was a thing when I was younger. It was like, are you going to be a teacher? Are you going to be a nurse? Like, not to have these stereotypical
Yeah. Yeah.
female careers, but that kind of was a thing when I was born in 1981. So, yeah, it's a little bit typical of the times.
Yes.
So when did you first discover that this was a potential career path?
Um, when I was in university and one of my friends was doing a co-op placement for Winter's head office. And I was like, sorry, what? Oh yeah, okay. So there's jobs, and yeah, it was quite late. So university years is when I started opening, like being exposed to the idea of careers in fashion.
And you studied business at university, correct?
That's right.
Yes. Okay. So there was no, as you sort of said, you didn't go to Parsons or fashion school or anything like that. You pursued business, and then once you graduated university, did you, it sounds like you got exposed to the fashion industry when you were in university. But was your first job out of school in fashion, or did you do something else?
It was actually. So I did end up working at Winter's head office.
So we're
Like,
really seeing
whoever's
winners is
listening,
a
there's
big
got to be a
theme.
drinking game
Yeah.
anytime
Okay. You said you had
I
no
say Winners.
partnership, but anyways.
You're like, hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so started at Winter's head office as an allocation analyst, which essentially, and in women's wear. So I was, to break it down, deciding how much of a category of product should go to each location in Canada, which really boiled down to me pressing shift F12 at the same time.
Okay. So wait, what does that mean? So you shift F12. I don't even know what that does.
Stephen, it means exactly what it sounds like.
Okay.
I was sitting in a cubicle pressing shift F12 to release product from the distribution center to the stores. That's what would activate the system and get the product out there.
So that was the glamorous first job in fashion.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, listen, there was a lot more to it. There was forecasting, there was planning, but it wasn't a fit for me in terms of, yeah, just kind of my passion, my skills. It was a starting place. I'm so grateful, and truthfully, I didn't have the patience to really wait it out and see where that could have taken me. I lasted there for 2 years, and I was ready to move on.
Okay. So what did you do after those first 2 years then, I guess, in after hitting F12 and being in logistics? What was the next step?
So at the time, I needed to start in the planning department because I thought I wanted to become a fashion buyer. So that was like step one. But again, coming back to my lack of patience, I wanted to travel, and I had my eyes set on Australia. So at the time, I mean, I was 23, 24. I was living with my parents in Mississauga, and I was trying to think of how I could tell them that I was going to go to Australia. And I thought, oh, let me get a teaching degree. And then I'll say I'm going for school, and they'll buy into that because it's for education. So that's what I did.
Okay. So wow. So you're working at Winners head office, and you went to school in Australia to become a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how long was that like program, I guess?
10 months. And then I was overseas for a year because I did a little travel around Australia before and after.
Okay. Okay. So you became a teacher, and then so did you start teaching when you came back to Canada then after that?
Not immediately, but I think it was came back in about 7 months after.
7 months. Okay. What
Is it-
subject did you
yeah.
teach?
Sorry.
What subject did you teach?
So I did teach business courses,
Okay.
and then also co-op, so putting students to work, coordinating work placements. And then this was actually my in for becoming a high school teacher is the teacher. So I did an LTO, which is a long-term occasional, which is basically like a contract job. That's how I got my in. And the teacher that I was stepping in for, she just started a fashion program at the high school.
Okay.
And she got called for jury duty. And they, I guess, going through resumes of teachers coming up, and I had this fashion experience at Winners. And so they were like, okay, let's interview Tanya. So I taught fashion.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. But I guess so thinking back to it, like I think that's obviously was probably a big move of like you had, gainful employment at a big organization, then you decide you want to move, across the world to, become a teacher. And again, I think as Taylor said, that's kind of one of the things, we want to talk to people about is when they take those steps. And I think this would be considered, a big step. I guess, what do you remember about that time? Like, what drew you, I guess, to feel like you had to go to Australia? I mean, you obviously could have studied education in Canada. I guess, yeah, just kind of curious as to like what it was like at that time, what your family said, what your friends said when you decided to make a big move like that.
I don't know what it was about Australia. I was just always super fascinated and curious about just that country, that culture. Um, and so, yeah, I don't know if it was like I just needed to shake up life and just go to the other side of the world, but I just had this like really huge desire to check out life there.
Yeah, and did it live up to the expectations what you're hoping it would be?
Somewhat. I ended up usually North Americans go to the Gold Coast when they go to school, and specifically teachers college in Australia.
Okay.
And because of what I took in university and how that translated into high school teachables, I had some more limited options. So I ended up going to a school in Bendigo, which is kind of like equivalent to, let's say, Guelph, Ontario.
Okay.
It was very like kind of small town. And so to answer your question, did it live up to it? I mean, originally I was thinking like, oh, I'm gonna like step out, be like on the beach, like, thinking Baywatch vibes. And then it was very much like, yeah, Guelph on rooms for hopping on campus.
Is the wildlife there as crazy as we think it is, like giant spiders and snakes
Yes.
everywhere, or it is? You actually saw
Yeah,
giant
thank
spiders?
goodness. not so much the snakes. I didn't come across the snakes, but spiders for sure, kangaroos, and then the biggest surprise, I don't know if you're familiar with them, are magpies, which are birds. Have you heard about these things?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we've got them.
Yeah, there's a lot.
I'm in Calgary.
Yeah, we both grew up in
Oh,
Edmonton, so they're very common there.
oh my God. So that was my first exposure to these guys. When one was trying to like swoop and yeah, it was terrifying. So I'd say my biggest fear when I was there were the birds, and I didn't expect that.
Okay, well, don't come
Well,
to Edmonton.
I can handle. Yeah, don't go to Alberta.
You get the magpies, but no ocean, and it's very cold. And yeah,
Okay, thank you. Noted.
yeah. There's no spiders though, so there's snakes, so
Right.
it's a positive. Okay, so
Oh my God.
so you come back and you became a teacher, and at this point was becoming like a fashion stylist on your mind at all, or were you kind of came back and had in your head that like it sounds like you were teaching fashion and you had like the steady employment of being a teacher, and were you like, this is I'm happy with this path, or was it always something that you thought you might want to become a stylist?
Stylist was not on my radar at all at that time. Not at all. To me, I don't want to say, so I went into teaching with like, okay, let me try this out. And of course, like, I have an older sister who's a teacher. I have an aunt, cousin, like a lot of family members are teachers. So for that career, I knew that it's a great career. I knew that it would be rewarding. And so there was curiosity about trying that career path out. But I wouldn't say that I was, from a young age, like, I want to be a teacher, like, this is my destiny.
Yeah.
And even when I started teaching, I was like, okay, well, let me try this out for a bit. Well, a bit turned into 9 years. But yeah, so to answer your question, like I didn't go into it being like, I want to be a teacher forever. This is like my calling, but also the fashion aspect was not on my radar at that time.
And so, I mean, I just went to Edmonton public school. There's no fashion courses. So I guess what grades were you teaching fashion to?
So it was grades 11 and 12. And when I was in high school, again, like didn't know that fashion careers were an option. And similarly, like we were not offered fashion courses at that time. And
Yeah.
I know even within, let's say, the greater Toronto area, not every high school offers fashion courses. It very much depends on, the school and the infrastructure and budgets and all of that. So, yeah, but really cool that this school that I taught at did offer that.
And was it like design or styling or like careers, like corporate kind of?
All of the above.
Oh,
All
yeah?
of the above, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you were teaching, I guess, then for 9 years, and then I guess at that point, is that when you transitioned into styling?
How long is this podcast?
No, this is all helpful for setting.
This is
Yeah.
the point where you guys can just lay down and
We'll just cut it
no,
all. Don't worry.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes. No, sorry. Continue.
No, there were a few more twists and so no, when I left teaching, and I need to explain why I left teaching because that's
Sure.
a pretty pivotal part of my journey. So did I like teaching? Yes. I loved students. I loved working with high school kids, teenagers. I thought, very relatable. I could have my stupid sense of humor. They got me and stuff. So I loved working with high school kids. But when I thought about teaching until I retired, as most do, honestly, that thought just didn't excite me. So I always kind of thought, like, what else could I do? And nothing was really coming to mind, especially because I was basically hitting the top of the pay grid. You think about all of the benefits of teaching with pension and everything, right? So I'm like, what could I leave and move to that would be comparable with pay and security and everything? And I couldn't think of it. So went on this girls trip with a couple of best friends, and one of my friends works in recruiting, and she said, like you work in staffing basically with kids because you're a co-op teacher, you're putting students to work, so there's really no difference. You can put adults to work. And she talked about the income potential, and rather than an hour drive to Brampton from Toronto to the high school I was teaching at, this staffing company was a 15-minute walk from my condo. And also at the time, I was taking acting classes and improv classes at the Second City because that's something else that I'll share, but I was interested in pursuing that. And so I thought, oh my God, amazing. I could go to casting calls from Toronto for my office job. Whereas in Brampton, that was not an option for me to leave my classroom and be like, oh, I'm just going to hit up a quick audition. Like, that's not a thing. Right. So anyway, the whole idea just sounded so awesome that I was like, okay, let me try this out. So I took an unpaid leave from teaching for a year. So it was like a calculated risk because I could always go back to teaching.
Yeah.
And what sparked all of this is actually one of my aunts she very like tragically passed away. And that just opened me up to all the things, of course, that we revisited in the pandemic, like life is short and take the risk and all of that stuff. So I'd say that's what really kind of gave me that nudge to take this calculated risk.
Okay. And so how long did you stay in recruiting for?
2 years.
2 years. And did you like it?
No, it brought me back to that cubicle at Winners. I wasn't pressing shift F12.
Yeah.
But it was like the 9 to 5, the office life, and you know what? I love people, but I don't think it just wasn't the best fit for my skill set. And I loved the staff there. That it was an awesome crew of people, but I just knew that I wasn't like rising to my potential and therefore not like doing the best for the company either.
You said something earlier that was kind of interesting about your motivation for wanting to kind of explore beyond teaching, even though it's a very safe job. And I think a lot of people fall into this sort of, I don't want to call it a trap, but it's like you have a fork in the road where it's like, do I stay in this place that it's going pretty well, it's safe, but maybe you don't feel fulfilled? Was it kind of like wanting to hit your potential? Is that what kind of drove you to take that risk? Because it sounds like maybe that first step wasn't quite what you were looking for either. So I'm curious, just like what motivated that, and then also like, did you kind of have doubts, and how did you get through that once you made the leap?
Yeah, so it's like I don't even know if I could put words to it. It was just this gut feeling, this inner feeling, this calling that there was something else, something more, something. I just knew. I just felt like I was kind of selling myself a bit short if I stayed in teaching, not at all dismissing the career or that field. I have so much respect for teachers. I'm actually the most proud of that chapter when I just love saying I used to be a teacher. But it just, yeah, there was just something that I'm like, I think there's something else. I don't know what the hell it is, but I know there's something else. Like something else was calling me, and I sorry that I can't articulate it. It was just like a feeling.
Yeah.
So do you have any, like, I guess, like advice for someone who maybe feels that, but they aren't sure if they're just like, how did you know to trust it? Was it just like, you're just kind of that type of person who goes off kind of your gut feeling, or how did you
Yeah,
work up the courage to actually follow through on it?
definitely. Yeah, listening, being in tune enough to know that gut feeling and to recognize it and act on it. But then also, like I mentioned, I was fortunate enough to be able to take that calculated risk where it was like I took that unpaid year. And so really, if I totally messed up, I could have gone back to teaching. It was like a security blanket. However, like after 6 months, when I was in the recruiting space in the staffing world, I actually knew 6 months in, I guess I knew that I didn't necessarily love the staffing world, but I also knew that I didn't want to go back to teaching. So I actually resigned to basically kind of like make it harder for myself if I did want to go back to teaching.
Yeah, this is a really interesting strategy, because I think Rudy mentioned this. One of our past guests was also a teacher, and I think he took a sabbatical, if I recall.
Yeah.
But do you think it was more of a psychological trick for yourself? Like, this is a good strategy to help me get out there and try something. But like, it sounds like after 6 months, even though you maybe didn't find that next step was working for you, you still realize now, yes, this was the right step. I'm going to keep going forward with it. Do you think, yeah, where do you think like that balance of like, maybe some of this is just like setting up and minimizing risk is just kind of a way to psychologically trick yourself into going forward? Or do you think it actually was necessary to have that sort of safety net there first?
No, it's such a great point, Taylor. I think it was just trickery. I think it was just a little mind game, and I was like, oh, I have this, and but truthfully, in my heart of hearts, I think when I took that unpaid leave, like I knew I wasn't going back. I think probably, I really haven't thought about it in this depth for some time, but I'm sure there was also an element of a little bit of like relief for maybe like my family as well, that like, oh hey, I'm doing, like, I do come from quite a conservative family, I would say, for the most part, and even though I was a very grown woman, I think I felt like I needed to explain a little bit to my family, needed the Italian roots, I don't know what it is, that like, oh, I'm doing this, but I could go back, don't you worry, I'll be okay.
So why do you think it was necessary then? You said 6 months in, you officially resigned to make it harder to go back. So sort of like, kind of like burning the boats kind of
Mhm.
mentality. But like, so why, I mean, you could have waited another 6 months before you did that. Like, why did you think that was important to you to do that then?
Hmm. Yeah, I think I was kind of tired of saying to people like, I'm doing this, but I have that. Like, I don't like to be
Yeah.
half-assed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I was just like, what am I doing? Like, why am I like, I wanted to bet on myself and be like, even if this staffing job doesn't work out, I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to do something else and it's going to work out. It was like to prove to myself that I believed in myself.
And was that hard for you to do? Because I think that's something that's super relatable where it's like, a lot of people who have success and do well in school and like are the type of people that set up a backup plan. They're just very practical people, which can, it's a blessing and a curse. It sets you up well in life, but it also can be harder to take those swings. Um, so I guess like, was that a challenge for you to be like, I'm going to bet on myself and like, my parents might think I'm crazy, whatever, but like, was that a challenge for you?
For sure.
Yeah.
In hindsight, it's easy for me to
Yeah.
to preach. Yeah, but no, definitely, I was like, "Holy shit!" Like, what if? What like all the doubts.
And was there anything you did that kind of like helped you talk to friends? I don't know, therapy, journal, whatever, like drink. Was there anything that like made you like help with that point of getting, being like, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to go for
Yeah, it's not as sexy as you saying drinking, but
it.
I really, I really did lean into my faith at that time. I grew up like in a Catholic system. I was a Catholic school teacher,
Yeah.
and there's this pastor, uh, love him or not, Joel Osteen,
Yeah.
and yeah, he's
The
from the
Houston
south.
guy, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the mega
exactly.
church guy. Yeah.
And I just got one of my aunts gifted me one of his books. And he really like resonated with me at that time. And so I would be listening to his sermons, like sometimes as I was at the cubicle in the staffing firm. And it's not even, take out the religious aspect. They're just like some messaging or some messages that are really universal in terms of like trust and
Yeah.
faith and timing. Yeah, take God or the universe like out of it. Or sorry, more so God. And yeah, I'd say honestly, Joel, like I'd have a joke with my boss at the time, like hashtag Joel. Like Joel really got me through that time because there were very, very dark days where
Yeah.
I was like, I don't love this, but where the hell am I going?
Yeah.
And like, what the hell did I do? Because I just left that super secure job. And am I like completely fucked right now?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess when you did do that move too, like the career aside, did it help facilitate like going on casting calls and the improv and the acting?
So the funny thing is, Stephen, like that, I didn't rise to the occasion when I went to to be honest, at the time I was still in acting school. And even just within my training, like I'd have, you kind of just share a monologue in front of the class. And I was like struggling to do that. I would say I was I was better at improv than at like rehearsed acting moments. Um, so even during that time, I didn't have a proper audition. I was still just in training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, but I guess like was it something you continued to do when you went into the recruiting world?
It was,
Yeah.
yeah. I was still taking acting classes. I was still doing improv. I can't recall the timeline right now, but I don't think I had any auditions
Yeah.
during
Okay.
that time. But it was more so like I was thinking, oh, I'm setting myself up for the future, right? I'm in the training right now. Then I'm gonna like get the commercial. Then I'm gonna
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Okay. So,
So
oh, good.
I was just so it sounds like at this point in time you maybe don't have a full vision of where you were going,
okay,
but you were sort of like narrowing it down. Uh, that process. So it sounds like some of the techniques you're using was like you were listening to tapes and sort of like forming, I guess you could say, your own internal, I guess, confidence or like dialogue. And then you were also exploring this other path, but you were taking little actions, it sounds like, every day. It
yeah,
wasn't like you're just sitting there complaining about being in a cubicle. So maybe could you talk a bit about like some of those like little things that maybe seem minor, but you think played a big role in helping pushing you forward?
for sure. So to your point, it was listening to podcast sermons. It was talking to everyone and anyone who would talk to me about where I was at and who could potentially help me. So once I knew that I didn't want to stay in the recruiting space, I was, pen to paper. What do I like? What do I not like? Skills, talents, just really putting that down on paper. And that allowed me to narrow in on two areas where I was like, okay, I love fashion. I love entertainment. Like I zoned in on those two. And then I was like, who do I know in those industries? I started reaching out to people. And then, so I was actually interviewing for what was it? It was some kind of like production assistant role at Entertainment Tonight Canada. And simultaneously, I was interviewing for a personal shopping coordinator at Holt, Renfrew, Yorkdale at the same time. So it was like, wow, like I put out those two things and they were like head to head in terms of me going for these jobs in terms of interviews. And if I'm being honest, like with the Entertainment Tonight Canada one, I'm thinking to myself, this is my in. And then they're going to see me and then I'm going to be on camera. And during my interview, she basically said, like, look, this is what it is. Like, this is not a stepping stone. Like, I guess I must have been really transparent, or I don't know, it was on my face or something. And I was like, oh shit, like, how did she know? And then they ended up like going with someone else. And then the personal shopping coordinator role at Yorkdale Holt Renfrew, that ended up working out. So that was the path that it was meant to be.
Okay. So then, you said you started to kind of like write down about what you like, what you want to do. Then you reached out to people. Did you have like a strategy? I guess when it came time to actually start reaching out and getting that progress, because I think that's also kind of I think the feeling of like wanting more, wanting to do something else is a pretty common feeling, but then actually like putting that into tangible actions of, writing out and reaching out to people. Did you have like a strategy for doing that, like a mentor that kind of helped you out? Or was that all just like you tried a bunch of stuff, got comfortable with rejection and started reaching out? But yeah, just curious if there was any thought process that went into that.
I'd say actually, funny enough, my boss at the staffing company, I had a couple of bosses and they were both super supportive, which is amazing, knowing that this wasn't the right fit. And I think they also recognized what I left behind with teaching. And so I think they felt a level of investment to help me with my career path, which again, that's how blessed I was, like in terms of working with these people.
Yeah.
So both of them acted as mentors during that time, as well as my friend who got me into the company who was working there. So I'd say the three of them were really instrumental in terms of having those conversations, um, and just like, yeah, just supporting me during that time. And it literally started with like me thinking about not even going on LinkedIn and reaching out to people, but just within my friends and family network, like who works in the fashion and entertainment spaces, and just started reaching out to them.
Yeah. And I guess just for a little time frame. So it sounds like you worked in teaching for 9 years, and then you were at the recruitment agency for a few years. So was this kind of like early mid 30s that you were kind of like when you were trying to pivot into fashion and entertainment?
Late 30s.
Late 30s. And was there, again, I think this is a somewhat common feeling, I guess, too, because you invested a lot into teaching, a lot
Mm-hmm.
into education. And, you know, I can just say from my perspective too, like sometimes you look around and you see people who they put in about like, you know, a decade or two into their career and they look so happy and then just kind of like, well, what is wrong with me that like, you know, I'm trying to like pivot.
Mhm.
But I guess like, did you have anything that like, was that a feeling you had where you're just like, oh, I feel behind or anything like that? Or was that something you didn't worry about? Just wondering if that was sort of a thought you had at that time.
Oh my God, I felt so behind. Like my friends were in these crazy executive roles,
Yeah.
like uh, CEO positions, making who knows how many figures. And I started at Holt, Renfrew, Yorkdale, like in the mall, not head office.
Yeah.
And I was making $25 an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was basically, I took almost like a 50% pay cut.
And again, I feel like I'm asking this question again, but was there something that helped you at that time too? Because you know, taking a step back, even if you have the vision that it's, you know, going to get you on the path that you want long term, but it still is very hard for sure.
Mhm.
But yeah, just curious, like, was there anything that helped you, you know, to keep from playing the comparison game of like looking at your friends or your former colleagues or anything like that and comparing yourself to them?
I just kept telling myself like this is temporary.
Yeah.
Like it's all gonna in the long term, it's all gonna work out. It's gonna work out better. This is like, yeah, this is just temporary. It's just a chapter. Um, and it was a bit of a it felt like that chapter, even though it wasn't very long, it felt, oh my God, like that was 2019.
Yeah.
And that was, I would say, like the most challenging year that I've had for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I remember listening to a podcast with like a big fashion designer, Amiri. I'm sure you've heard of
Yeah.
the company. Yes. Anyways, he was talking about how he started his brand when he was 37 with 3 kids, and he went to law school, and just all his, you know, friends and stuff were partners at law firms, and just like, you know, feeling kind of silly to be like, oh, I'm starting a clothing brand when everyone else is,
Right.
you know, a lawyer, and just like how challenging that be. And, you know, it's kind of crazy to think that probably has killed a lot of, you know, dreams and things that could have been just by people getting hung up on that part.
Yeah. Totally. It's our ego, and just that comparison game is such a deadly space to sit in mentally.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were at Holt then, and how long did you stay at Holt for in the personal shopping role?
9 months.
9 months. And is that when you shifted into doing your own personal shopping?
So we're getting so close, Stephen.
So
So
close, yeah. I guess I am thinking about COVID as well, because you're saying
yes,
2019 and then you were at
yeah,
the mall. So I imagine
right.
that probably played a role.
So yeah, we were getting so close to the chapter. So started at Holt's January 2019, left there September or October, whatever. And basically, so in that role, learned so much about, obviously, like designers and like, just that fashion space that I came from the world of Winners, right? And then
Yeah.
I just learned a lot about this other elevated fashion space. But my role was more managerial and administrative. And when I would see what the personal shoppers were doing, I was like, well, I can do that. I had the confidence, I knew I could do it. But I thought, I don't want to do it here because it's a long kind of journey. You have to start as a sales associate, build your client book, blah blah blah. So I just knew it was going to take too long there. So it inspired me to be like, you know what, I want to do personal shopping, but I'm going to do it wherever the hell I want, like for people, not just in one location or one retailer. And but I um I was running around quite a bit in that role. It was a very challenging role. And I found, like, for what I was getting paid, it wasn't making sense. So I thought to myself, what if I work as a server at a restaurant, make amazing tips, and then I could do styling on the side? So I started working at Joey's at Sherway Mall.
Okay.
hmm So that was my first serving job ever. I guess I was like 38 or 39, I don't know. And fun story, one of the supervisors was a former teacher or former student at the
Oh
high
yeah.
school that I taught, and she had to quiz me on learning the menu one day. So like if we can't like laugh at that moment, I don't know what. Yeah,
Okay, and you did
yeah.
that before COVID?
Yeah, so I started at the restaurant October 2019,
Okay.
and then I actually left from there February 2020, and then COVID started a month later.
So just before we get into the COVID era,
Yes.
so you're doing this menu check. Are you are you feeling like you're like lost? Or are you still feeling like I know what I'm doing? This is just like not my ideal scenario. Like what was your kind of thought process? Were you feeling like kind of like, oh no, what have I done? Or were you still like, I have a vision for where I'm going?
It was a bit of both. So I felt like I thought I was just going to make crazy money, and like turns out I'm not a great server. Turns out I love people and I can make people laugh and talk to people and learn all about their families, but I can't carry like three plates on one arm, and I can't remember the damn menu and all of that stuff. So I actually had the most anxiety that I've had in any role working at the restaurant. However, what also happened, like the magic and beauty, is that it was like the craziest manifesting place for me, because people would say like, "Oh, like is this your full-time job?" And I'd be like, "No, I'm actually a fashion stylist and an actor." Wasn't really doing either. And then a lot of people, there were TVs at Joey's and they'd be like, "Oh my God, I could totally see you on TV." And like, fast forward 2 years later, I'm on City Line. But at that time, like literally, like I was referencing acting. I still had the acting dream like alive in my heart. Um, and then so what ended up happening is, as I was talking to customers at Joey's about the fact that I do styling and I do these closet edits, that turned into real clients who were like, "Oh my God, that sounds amazing. I would love closet edit." And I was getting contacts from customers at Joey's, and that turned into real clients. So my very first non-family and friend client for a closet edit was January 4th, 2020.
Okay. Okay. So that's the beginning of 2020 is kind of where your own fashion styling, personal shopping career kind of takes off.
Yes, thank you for
Yeah,
still being
yeah,
with me
yeah,
on
yeah.
this story.
No,
Yes.
okay. So then you start doing that in January, and you said you quit serving in February. So like, was it at that point where that was the only thing you were doing, and you were making enough income from the personal shopping and styling to support yourself, so you didn't need to have another role?
Not at all. I was bleeding money. I was ready to rent out my condo and move in with my parents. I What saved me during that time was, so because I wasn't a great server and I wasn't making great money, I finally tuned into the fact of like, oh, I could do supply teaching and make much better money. It's still flexible. And like, it's not me. I didn't feel like I was selling out going back into teaching. Like, I know that's a weird mental
Yeah.
thing that I had. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, like going
Because at
back
that
to,
point,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, I was like just trying to think a little bit more business minded in terms of income and flexibility, and at that point a little bit of mental comfort, because like I said, serving just really was taxing for me for whatever reason, like emotionally. Um, so I started supply teaching in March, right before the pandemic.
Okay. And then was that something that you were able to continue during the pandemic?
Here and there, here and
Yes.
there. Like it wasn't steady,
Yes.
but the styling. So when I started the styling properly, I suppose in January 2020, I was able to, like, I was really like picking up speed right before the pandemic with like new clients, closet edits, personal shopping, like styling on shoots. Like things were really, really flowing for me like crazy. And then, of course, we had that halt. But I would say, even during the beginning of the pandemic, like there were some things that were kind of possible to come together, like styling for some creative photo shoots. And then really I shifted my focus on content creating from my condo.
Okay. Okay. So you were able to keep it going. Um, and then I guess since then, like, are you still doing the substitute teaching and continuing with that, or like, are you fully like? I guess at what point were you able to just like go all in with the styling?
I think that would have been 2020, maybe 2022.
Okay. Okay. And
Yeah.
so, obviously things got thrown off by the pandemic, but how did you continue I guess to get clients beyond serving? Because it sounds like that's where you sort of got your initial clients, but obviously you stopped that. So what was kind of the process to like keep getting customers?
Yeah, so I would say like when I did acquire those clients from serving, then I used those experiences to create some content. I shared that on Instagram, and then that became like a ripple effect of then others that were following me, seeing my services, and then reaching out. So I would say Instagram was my big marketing tool at that time.
Okay. Okay. And then, and would you say your typical client is just like, um, just like a regular individual who's looking to up their style or their closet, or do you do a lot of commercial styling, fashion show styling? What's kind of like, I guess, your typical customer?
Typically, it is the everyday individual,
Yeah.
more so female.
Yeah.
And now I've kind of honed into a client base of roughly between the age of 30 and 60 as a professional woman.
Okay. Okay. No, that's very helpful to understand. So then you're doing this sort of through the pandemic, and as you had mentioned, when you stopped serving 2 years later, you were on City TV. So how did that come about?
Bless you both for listening to all of this.
No, no, this is very helpful. This is a lot of
Oh my
twists and turns.
gosh.
This is exactly what we're looking for.
Okay, okay. So many, so many.
Yes.
Um, so once I was creating content at home during the pandemic, I started gaining that confidence in terms of, even though it was my iPhone camera, it was a camera. And that's where I would say my experience doing improv previously um like came together with this world of doing some fashion content. And I had watched all those morning shows like City Line and Marilyn Dennis for years when I was younger. I loved watching Fashion Friday. And even as a high school teacher, I would put on Fashion Friday sometimes to my class. And I remember watching those on air stylists and thinking to myself, like, very, I guess, ignorantly or naively, like I could do that, even at that time when I was teaching. And so I think it was just a perfect storm of like, I don't know, I guess I was staying at home by myself, had this delusional confidence, like was practicing in front of my camera, that I was like, okay, like January 2021, I'm going to start pitching these networks. And so I put in a formal audition tape to Marilyn Dennis through their website. And then for Cityline, I'd actually styled a couple of women who were on the show the year before as like guests, and they did virtual segments.
Okay.
But I'd styled them. And so then when I was ready, I reached out and I said, hey, can you give me like a producer name that you worked with? So I got an email, and then I was just hounding this one city line producer by email.
So when you say hounding, were you just like continued following up or like, because
Yes.
yeah. So how many tries did it take, I guess, until
I think it was three. I think it
three?
was three. And then finally she emailed me back. Then we had a call. And then over the call, it was pretty quick. And she actually sounded more interested in improv because I had started during the pandemic. One of the things I started was like an online improv school for kids.
Okay.
That was like another way to supplement some cash at some time at one point.
Yeah.
So I somehow that came up and she sounded more interested in that. And I was like, no, I'm talking to you for fashion. So anyway, she was like, you know what? When we have virtual auditions, I'll reach out to you. And I thought she was just saying that. And then she actually did follow up. So I reached out first in January 2021. And then she came back to me in May saying there was an audition time in June.
And what was that audition like?
So I'm telling you, like, hashtag Joel
Yeah.
and all of the guardian angels
Yeah.
looking out for me. I think the only reason that I am where I am today is because of the pandemic, because it was a virtual audition. So I was able to be in the comfort of my condo. It was over Zoom. It was far enough because I had to show like a whole display. Like basically, I was demonstrating what I would do for a segment. So they couldn't see like my upper lip sweat because I was so damn nervous. They couldn't see like my hand quivering, you know what I mean? And so like if that was all in person, I don't know that I could have like rose to the occasion similar like as I had already kind of quote unquote failed for my acting auditions.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would have been successful in person. So I am so, so grateful that it was virtual.
I know we're I want to be mindful of time here, but I do have a question if we go back a bit. Right at the pandemic started, it sounds like you switched to doing more online content. And then that also served you well when it came time for the auditioning. When you got started, what, because obviously I think that's like something a lot of business owners struggle with, is like you need to promote yourself in some way, and social is a big way to do that. But they
Mhm.
maybe don't know how to get started, or they don't have experience with, say, film editing or photography. I don't know how experienced you were up to that point, but was this something where you felt like you already had the skills and you were just kind of like putting it out there, or did you really struggle with that? Um, is this good enough to put out here, and you just trial and error your way into something that works, or was this something that you had kind of naturally over time been building up the skills for anyways?
A bit of both. I was, yeah, I mean, to this day, sometimes I put out stuff and I'm like, is this good enough? Should I put this out? But when I started my Instagram page, I had basically stockpiled like a bunch of images and posts because I wanted to post consistently and put out a post every day for a month. So I had really like taken my time to plan that out. And then so for quite some time, I think it was, I don't know, 6 months maybe, I was just doing like static photos and I was not doing any type of video. And I was freaking out the first time I put out any kind of video. I think it was even just over my story. It wasn't even like on my grid. And like you would have thought that I was live streaming like across the globe. Like it was so ridiculous. Like I could edit this shit before I put it out, but it was like so nerve-wracking. And then when I realized like I can edit it, I don't have to put it out. Like it just gave me more confidence. And then yeah, I met with a friend who is really proficient at video editing and he showed me InShot, the app. And I just like honed in on that app. And just by practicing, I feel like, yeah, now I'm like an InShot expert. And even like another app for images is Facetune to like, play with brightness and just like you can obviously play with some of the lighting and whatnot. So those two apps, I feel like were massive in helping me with content.
No, very cool. So when you got on City TV, did that lead to like a huge boost in your business? Like were more customers reaching out, and did that help like your personal business?
It did. I would say not immediately,
Yeah.
but over time for sure, because it was helping with my, like reputation, like validating me as a stylist. And then even like to this day, like sometimes I'll just have someone new reach out and I ask them like, how did you hear about me? And they just say that they Googled, but I've never invested in SEO. And
Yeah.
I believe that because of Cityline and all of these things, that's helped push me up in terms of, Google searches.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up here, I do want to ask a question. I noticed on your website, a lot of your testimonials were different than I expected, in that they seem like you really foster a connection with your clients beyond just providing a service. I kind of get the feeling maybe it's connected to you learned a lot of skills along the way, from teaching all the way through. Um, yeah, do you have any advice for how you do such a good job of that? Like, is there something that you intentionally do that stands out with resonating with your clients in this way?
Oh, thanks, Taylor. I mean, I think I said it before, like I genuinely do really love people. I love connecting with people. And I feel very privileged in terms of the work that I do, that I get to help someone feel better by how they're dressing. So I think like there's just this automatic energy exchange, which is so beautiful when I get to work with individuals, that like I'm leaving them better off than I met them. And and they're also placing a lot of trust in me, which I again I'm so, so grateful that they're trusting in me. There's a lot of stylists out there, there's a lot of personal shoppers. So the fact that, they chose me, they're trusting me, I need to make sure that they are happier than when I found them. And so whatever I need to do to ensure that they feel like they got their money's worth and like it was a good experience, I will do that.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. One thing we kind of like to ask, at the end of our episodes is, hearing about your journey, and it kind of seems like a lot of the dots sort of connected, in hindsight. Like when you were working the recruitment, you kind of wanted to work in entertainment, but also fashion. And now it sounds like, you're kind of exactly in those two worlds between City TV and also being a personal shopper and fashion stylist. And, I imagine at the time though, when you're working the recruitment and then you're going to Holt, it would probably be, a big challenge of, having faith in the vision and, hoping it all comes together. So I think that's really helpful to understand. And I guess the question we would have for you then is, what advice would you have to someone who's, either thinking about starting their own thing and they have kind of like a specific idea of what they do, or, maybe more similar to you where it sounds like you had the idea that what you were doing right now wasn't exactly where you wanted to be, but you have to like trust that, it's the right move to maybe stop and try something else. But what would you say to someone who's kind of thinking about taking that leap and moving forward to, I guess, the career or the journey that they want to start?
I know maybe it's not like the most positive way of looking at it, but one thing that actually helped me too is I looked at what is the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And when you really play that out, like it doesn't make it as scary because it's like you're really then like planning the steps in case it doesn't work out, which hopefully it will, that if it goes down that way, like you will be able to recover from it. You'll even maybe put together a plan in terms of how you will recover from it. So I think that instead of just like sitting in this like gray space, if you can really look at, that worst case scenario and face that head on and realize that like it's still going to be okay even if that worst case scenario does unfold, that helps to give you the confidence to take the risk.
Yeah. No, that's really good advice. Yeah, no, this has been fantastic. It was really cool to hear about your story and all the different journeys you took along the way and how it kind of, like I said, ended up merging those worlds that you had interest in and things like that. So it's great. But I do want to come back to that question. I mean, was it percolating in the
Oh
back of
no,
your mind of the best style, or are we gonna have to, maybe we have another episode a year from now or something, and we can circle back to that. But did anything pop up as we were talking?
I was like, surely Stephen will have forgotten
No,
because
it was
I've
all.
talked
I wasn't
for
listening to anything you were saying all episode. I was just thinking about this.
I mean, it may not, I might change my answer in a year, but I do love Pharrell. I
There you go.
love, yeah, I've always loved Pharrell in all of his artistic expression, from music to fashion. So he comes to mind. I know I have a better answer, but I'm gonna give you Pharrell right now. I feel good about that.
That's perfect. That's great. Well,
Okay.
again, oh, go ahead, Taylor.
No, we do want to give you a chance to promote where people can follow you. Um,
Sure. Well, honestly, Stephen Taylor, thank you again for finding me. Thank you for the opportunity. You guys, yeah, you guys made me feel super comfortable. I really appreciate it. And I could be found on my website, TaniaTonello.com, or on Instagram at Tania Tonello.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and hopefully we can stay in touch.
Yeah, I'd love that. Thank you.
All right.